All right. So 3B.4 factoring by grouping. We've kind of done a little factoring by grouping, right? Where we created our groups ourselves. Well, what if you're given the groups to begin with? Like, how do you solve? Well, it's going to go fairly fast because we already know how to do it. So on page 14, 114, this is part B. So this is going to be our 3B.4 part 1 on page 14. On this page, you're going to have 3 sections. So pretend that these are even. And we're going to have example A, example B, we're going to do together. And then example C, you're going to do with your group. Okay, that's our plan of action for our notes. Cool. All right, let's keep going. So in box A, you're writing 8y squared minus 12y plus 10y minus 15. So you have 8y squared minus 12y plus 10y minus 15. Your initial instincts may be to combine the middle, right? You're like, oh, I'm just going to combine the middle. Don't do it. It's separated on purpose to actually help you evaluate this. So we're going to factor this. Not evaluate, we're going to simplify. We're going to factor. We're going to factor by grouping. By grouping means you're going to combine the first 2 terms together and then the second 2 terms together. So my first pair of grouping is going to be 8y squared minus 12y plus 10y minus 15. Once you've grouped the terms together, you're then going to find the GCF of each group. So you're going to find the GCF of the first pair and the GCF of the second pair. What is the GCF of the first pair? 4y. Perfect. What is the GCF of the second pair? 5. Okay. Once you've identified your GCF, you're then going to factor out. Remember, factor out means we're dividing. So we're factoring out 4y. Remember, I told you just because you don't live with your parents anymore doesn't mean you're not part of the family. You still matter. So it doesn't disappear. Okay. It's still there. So make sure you put your GCF. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. Y squared divided by y is y. Negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. And y divided by 1 becomes Casper the Friendly One. So we're going to repeat it for the next one. So we're factoring out 5, a positive 5. Again, still part of the family, just lives outside. 10 divided by 5 is 10 divided by 5 is 2. Y has nothing. And then negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. Okay? After you've divided out your GCF, you're then going to look for what's called our common binomial. Common binomial. Remember, binomial means you're adding or subtracting 2 terms together. So we're looking for our common binomial. What is our common binomial? It's 2y minus 3 is our common binomial. Do we see that? When you are factoring out the common binomial, it's being kicked out the house. And what's left inside once it's removed? 4y plus 5. So your factors are 2y minus 3 times 4y plus 5. How we feel? So let's go over steps. So step 1, we made our groups. Step 2, we found our GCF. Step 3, we factored out our GCF. Step 4, we found our common binomial. And then step 5, we factored out our common binomial. Okay? Does any part of those steps throw you off? Easy? All right, let's try it again. Are you ready to try it again? Anyone against trying again? No? You don't really have a choice. Okay. So example B. Your example B is 15a to the 6th minus 25a to the 3rd minus 6a to the 3rd plus 10. Okay. I want to bring up with this example that you should always check for GCF because initially you're like, oh, 25, 15, 10. But is there a GCF? No. Who stops it from there being an overall GCF? The 6, right? So then therefore I can continue to go on with the steps of grouping. So we're going to go through the steps of grouping again. So step 1 is to create your groups. So my groups are 15a to the 6th minus 25a to the 3rd plus negative 6a to the 3rd plus 10. Notice how, because this is minus 6, when I created my grouping, it became a negative 6. Remember, subtraction is just adding a negative. Okay? Subtraction is just adding a negative. So step 1 is done. After step 1, we then are going to find our GCF. What is the GCF of our first group? 5a to the 3rd, 5a cubed. Perfect. What is the GCF of our second pairing? What kind of 2, though? It's going to be a negative 2 because your leading is negative. If your leading is negative, your GCF is negative. Okay? So now we've identified our GCF. We're going to factor out our GCF, and we get 5a to the 3rd. 15 divided by 5 is 3. A to the 6th divided by a to the 3rd is a to the 3. Negative 25 divided by 5 is negative 5. And a to the 3rd divided by a to the 3rd becomes Casper the Friendly 1. Okay, now we're dividing out negative 2. So divide out negative 2. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is positive 3. A negative divided by negative makes a positive. A cubed is still there. Positive 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. Okay, then our next step is our CB, our common binomial. So our common binomial is what? 3a to the 3rd minus 5. When I factor out my common binomial, you go away, you go away. What am I left with? Minus 2. Bam. How you feeling? Doable? Guess whose turn it is? If you said yours, you are a genius. Okay, so you're going to do example C. So in the last box, you're writing 15x cubed minus 25x squared y minus 6xy squared plus 10y cubed. Okay, I'm going to give you time to work through it and then check with your group mates or a neighboring table if you are flying solo today. Step 1 is to do your grouping. Step 2 is to identify your GCF. Step 3 is to factor out / divide out your GCF. Step 4 is to find your common binomial. And step 5 is to factor out the common binomial. Again, step 1 is to make your groups. Step 2 was to find the group's GCF. Step 3 was to factor out your GCF. Step 4 was to identify your common binomial. And then step 5 was to factor out your common binomial. If you did all 5 steps, then you should have an answer. All right. Are we good? Thumbs up. Able to go? Yeah. All right. So my group, we have 15x to the third minus 25x squared y plus negative 6x y squared plus 10y to the third. Our GCF here is actually 5x squared. Your GCF here should have been negative 2y squared. How are we doing? Good. Now we're going to factor out our GCFs, and we're left with 3x minus 5y. Then we're going to do the next one, factoring out negative 2y squared, and we're left with 3x minus 5y. So our common binomial we're going to factor out is 3x minus 5y. When I factor out 3x minus 5, we are left with 3x minus 5 times 5x squared minus 2y squared. And ta-da! How do you feel? Remember, you can always use what to check yourself? FOIL. You can always go back and FOIL. All right, part 1 is done.